So, Mr. Cantopher, I'm so honored to be able to have this conversation with you, and also a great pleasure to introduce you to the Romanian public. So, welcome to Elephant Fest.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot for coming. You have been a member of the Royal College of Psychiatry since 1983. You were elected fellow of the college in 1999 and have written the best-selling Depressive Illness, The Curse of the Strong. But today we shall talk about your recent book, Toxic People, dealing with dysfunctional relationships.
Yes, absolutely.
So, thanks a lot for this book. I read it in one evening because it was so interesting. And I must confess that I found myself in many of the situations presented in the book. And I think, this is my opinion, that unfortunately, most of us deal with toxic people every day. So we think. How do we really know we are in the company of a toxic person, or is just an unfortunate set of circumstances that might not happen again?
Yes. No, that's a good question. There are two aspects to this, I think. First of all, there's your own vulnerability. So the people who I saw when I was practicing as a psychiatrist most commonly were made ill by other people. I saw people mostly with stress-related illnesses, anxiety, depression, illnesses like this, and they were mostly made ill by other people. And it was only certain types who were. So these are people who were, you might say, the best people. They were kind, giving, trusting, generous, uncritical, or at least uncritical of others, very critical of themselves, tending to put themselves last, keen for approval, keen to avoid conflict, often anxious and prone to depression. So these are the folks who were particularly vulnerable. And for them, I developed a set of feelings, really, which could indicate to them that they were in the presence of a toxic person.
So what you are saying, that there are some people more predisposed than others to get into relationships with toxic people?
Yes, very much so. If you are one of the givers of the world, the toxic people will find you.
Oh my God.
It's not that most people are toxic. Most people are quite nice most of the time, though we all have our moments. But the few really toxic people in the world have very sharp antennae. They are able to find people who are trusting and giving and who they can take advantage of. So if you are one of those very trusting, giving types, you'll tend to be surrounded by the takers of the world.
That's not good news.
That's right. So it's like moths around a flame. And you would be forgiven for thinking that everybody is a taker and everybody is like that. They're not. It's just that they've found you. And so in order to find the people who are better for you, you have to find a way of clearing past the toxic people who are the ones who crowd around you.
But before asking you how can you solve this situation, how can you make yourself not that vulnerable to toxic people, I will ask you, how can we identify toxic people or toxic situation? How do we know? Because most of us, we will not know. We will probably think this is life, this happens to me and my neighbor, and maybe I have this bias that people are toxic, but it is not. Maybe I just exaggerate. How can we identify that a person is really a toxic person?
Yes, and well, of course, you don't need to make solid value judgments here. It's personal. Are they toxic to you? I mean, this person may be very good for somebody else, but are they toxic for you?
Okay.
And you can identify that by feelings. And I'm going to refer to a list of
Yes,
these
please.
indicators from my book. I'll just pick a few of them.
Yeah.
You feel exhausted, unhappy, or stressed much of the time when you are with them. You often feel obliged or pushed by them to do things you wouldn't do by choice. You feel guilty about not doing more for them. You feel judged or humiliated by them. You spend a lot of time fearing what they will do next. You can't really say what you mean or feel when you're with them. You feel trapped a lot of the time with them. You frequently make special allowances for them that you wouldn't make for anybody else. And you maybe find yourself facilitating or colluding in behaviors which you wouldn't tolerate from anybody else. So there are a few of them. There are more than that, but you can get the picture. These are feelings which you get with this person, and these are behaviors of yours which change in the presence of this person and which do you no good.
And your behavior will change, or the way you feel when you are with these people is repeatedly, yeah, I mean, all the time, not just in some circumstances. Whenever you are in the presence of that person, you start having those kind of emotions.
You're absolutely right. It's, as I said, we all have our moments, when
Yes.
we're not as good as we should be.
Yes.
But if it's all the time, if it's habitual, that again and again and again, you find yourself pushed, humiliated, forced into situations which you wouldn't want to, by the same person over and over again, then this person is likely toxic for you. And I want to make a disclaimer here. I'm not saying that these are bad people.
Yes.
I'm not making any judgment. But what I am saying is that these people are bad for you because of the coming together of what you are like and what they are like. So you need to take some action.
So mainly my next question you already answered, because I was going to ask you if different types are more toxic than others. So, but I guess your answer will be it depends on how it affects every individual.
That's absolutely right. I mean, there are one or two. There are one or two types of people who are really toxic to everybody.
Okay.
The most well-known and obvious type is the psychopath or sociopath. They both mean the same thing. These are people with no conscience. They have no feeling for other people. They have no conscience. They have no ability to learn from their mistakes. They have no sense of anything emotional, really, other than what they can get away with. So,
Okay.
You are purely an object to be used by them. Now, people don't come with a label on their forehead saying psychopath.
Exactly.
And most of them, psychopaths, are not like Hannibal Lecter. They don't murder people.
Yes, I
But
guess.
most of them are pretty subtle. They have learned through their lives how to charm people, how to get what they want from people, which you can get more from people by charm and persuasion than you can by manipulation than you can by bullying them. So these folks can seem to be very charming, but over a period of time, you realize that actually behind this facade, there is nothing there. There's nothing in terms of feeling or caring that is there. There is purely a seeking after opportunity. Now, I mean, the pure version of the psychopath or sociopath is fairly rare. I've met I've met 2 or 3 in my time, but they are pretty rare outside of the.
I was going to ask you, all charming people, all people who has this charisma, or they seem to be a little bit manipulative. They might be, but you just answered me that they are rare. It's not like you find them everywhere on the streets.
No, exactly. They're far more common for people to have traits of this rather than to be the full-blown, dangerous psychopath. I mean, in my view, psychopaths are actually quite common in politics because, because, I mean, would you or I feel important enough to represent millions of people? I mean, the answer is no. And anybody who does feel important enough to do so, I'm very suspicious of. So hence you get a collection of these really quite toxic people up in the top echelons of politics. But that's just the way that it is, so long as you're not going to go into politics, you won't rub shoulders with too many of these people.
Yeah, but, I'm not going, so I'm
no,
not
indeed. Indeed. The other type, which is toxic to pretty much everybody, I would say, are sadists. Now, these are people who enjoy humiliating and causing pain to other people. Not necessarily physically, not necessarily the sort of the psychopathic sadists who you see in crime novels, but people who genuinely are just at their core really unkind, who really enjoy to make you feel bad. And these people really are pretty much toxic to everybody. But the other types of folks, and there are many of them who I list in my book, are toxic to some people but not to others. So, for example, let me give an example. Boundary invaders. These are people who give them any boundary and they will crash straight through it. So they get discounts in shops where there are no discounts on offer. They will go into a restaurant which is full without a booking, and they will get a table. They will get somebody to agree to stuff which they had no intention of agreeing. So these boundary invaders are really quite toxic to people who are vulnerable and who are givers, the good givers of the world. But of course, to people who have solid boundaries and are very assertive, these people aren't a threat at all. They're actually quite amusing. It can sometimes be quite useful to hang about with them for a little while because you'll get stuff, but not good if you're vulnerable, because while they may seem to be useful to hang on to the coattails of these folks, eventually they have a tendency to turn on you.
So mainly what the readers will find in your book is some types of people that are toxic to them, of course, but probably not toxic to others. For example, I found that a type of toxic person that is not good for me is those people who are not working, who are not doing their work, and I'm always there doing the work for everyone else. So I read the book, I found my main type of toxic people that affect me. So maybe all the readers will find something and the type of toxic people in your book.
Well, you see, this is the point. So it's important to understand yourself, to do a little bit of analysis of yourself and a little bit of analysis of the people who you find difficult. So presumably, if you're one of the folks who takes responsibility for things, who if there is something to be done, you'll tend to do it.
Exactly.
If somebody throws something in the air, you'll be the one who catches it. Well, then you're going to be vulnerable to the people who I call users, abusers, loafs, and energy vampires. And I can expand a little bit on that. The users are people who really are on the lookout for what they can get and what they can get you to do for them. Abusers are a type of those who will tend to have no compunction in putting inconvenience onto you in order to get what they want. Loafers are just lazy people who usually cover over their laziness with charm. So they will be, charming and persuasive, but actually they just don't do anything. They're really pretty much a waste of space. But you find yourself, acting as their unpaid servant. And energy vampires are those people who always have a problem. There's always a problem, and they will put the problem onto your shoulders, and they will moan and groan about this or that. And then you will suggest to them a course of action which they can take in order to deal with their problems. And they will say, oh, yes, but I can't do that because. And so there's always a reason why they can't do what you've suggested or find a way of finding a solution. And so at the end of the day, you find yourself totally exhausted by their problems. And having dumped all their problems on you, you find that they feel absolutely fine.
Exactly.
So the next
so
day,
I'm here in line. This is how I feel. Not every day, but most of the days I do many things that the other people should do, and especially mothers probably are exhausted because they do all the things that their children should do at a specific age, but because mothers are quick.
That's absolutely right. I mean, mothers are particularly vulnerable from this point of view. I mean, arguably, women are more vulnerable than men, because I don't think this is sexist to say it, but there are still societal roles, and women tend to do a lot more of tasks, particularly household and domestic tasks and family tasks and whatever. And men, on the whole, tend to feel entitled not to do very much outside of their workplace. Now, this isn't always true, but it sometimes is.
Sometimes it is.
So stress-related illness is about, nearly twice as common in women as in men. And I don't think that's because, women are constitutionally more stressed than men. I think it's that the women on the whole tend to take on more and take more responsibility for things. And so, hence it comes to the first part of what you need to do, which is boundaries. You need to set up some boundaries on what you take responsibility for and how much you're prepared to do.
Because you mentioned this, let's move to what can we do when we encounter toxic people, because we can meet them at our work, we can have them among our family, so we can have toxic people around us everywhere, not only in specific situations, and say, okay, it's so rare to have toxic people around us. So it's not that rare, it's quite common. So I would say, what can we do? So what can we do to avoid being harmed by toxic people?
Yes, absolutely. Well, of course, I can't go through all of this because this is about half of the book, but I'll pick out some of the important things. First of all, there's increasing your resilience. Now, you can do that. I think there's probably three main ways. One is learn and get very good at a relaxation exercise. Now, there's a relaxation exercise in my book. You can alternatively find relaxation exercises online. You can find audio devices which have relaxation exercises. There is transcendental meditation or yoga. There's various forms. They all work. But here's the crucial thing about a relaxation exercise. Whichever one you choose, it will be a complete waste of time to begin with. They don't work to begin with. They're like any skill. You have to learn them. And that means practicing for half an hour every day, even if you haven't got time. Practice the exercise. You're doing it for the purpose of the practice. And eventually, after, I don't know, something between 1 and 3 months probably, you'll find that the exercise is of some help to you in bringing your level of tension and stress down. If you keep doing it, eventually you'll get to the point that I'm at now. I mean, I can switch on a relaxed state in about 10 seconds flat. I can bring my pulse rate down, my heart rate down, my blood pressure down, clear my mind in about 10 seconds, because I did this every single day of my life for 2 to 3 years. And I had to, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have got through medical school. So because I was really quite an anxious guy. So I had to do this, and I got good at it. So anybody can do it. I'm no better than the next person. So learn a relaxation exercise. The second is learn mindfulness. Now, you can just Google mindfulness, or you can find a book on mindfulness. It's a technique which is borrowed from various Eastern philosophies and martial arts, and also a bit of Buddhism in there. There's two main principles to mindfulness. The first is be aware of your present. So be, rather than worrying about the future or worrying about the past, be present in what is happening now. That sounds easy, but actually it's quite difficult. It takes quite a lot of practice to be really present just on what's happening around you now. I had a test for my patients to check if they were mindful. And I would say to them, as you come into the hospital, there's a flower bed outside. What color are the flowers? And you see, if they don't know the answer to that, then they aren't mindful, because they weren't attending to what was around them in that moment. They were worrying about what they were going to say to me. And what I say to them is, look, that can be left to later, you know. So attend to what is around you now. And the second is, don't fight unless you have to fight. You know, if you have to, then sometimes you have to. But otherwise, don't fight your feelings. Don't fight unfairness. Don't fight your emotions. Don't fight other people unless you have to. Just be. So there's a parable in some of these philosophies, which is a man is rushing at you with a knife.
Yes.
Well, don't grapple with him. Try and position yourself with a wall straight behind you. And as your assailant reaches you, just deftly step to one side and let him smash himself into the wall. So don't fight, let him destroy himself. And that's a kind of a principle.
I think that is a little bit hard to do, because we are used since childhood to just fight over everything, and we had a feeling that if we will not fight, we will probably lose, or something bad will happen to us. I think this is a pretty hard exercise.
Well, you know, there's a difference between assertiveness, which is very important, and aggression, which is not very helpful. So when somebody is being toxic to you, it's crucial that you have some boundaries and you learn how to be assertive and to protect those boundaries. But, you know, step aside, move away from them, rather than engaging in, you know, head-to-head combat, because they are going to be better at fighting than you are. They've been doing it all their lives. So avoid them where possible, or avoid the situations where possible. Find some ways around it. So that's another one, is being strategic. So don't be angry, be strategic. There is a section in the book about game playing. Game playing is where a game player forces you into a position which you would not voluntarily occupy by covert mechanisms. You find yourself sort of forced to feel guilty by them, even though you've got nothing to feel guilty about. So the importance here is to understand what game is being played with you, and then to develop an antithesis. An antithesis is a maneuver which allows you to stop the person who's playing the game with you from getting a reward. So I won't go further into this now, because it's a thing all of its own. If you're interested in the concept of game playing, the best book on it, it's about 50 years old now, written by a guy called Eric Byrne, called Games People Play. It's a little book, and it's very good, particularly the second half, which is about the games people play with you. So yes, learn how to deal with games. Avoid double standards. So typically I found my patients would forgive people almost anything, but they would forgive nothing of themselves. You know, they were entirely non-critical of other people, but terribly critical of themselves. Now,
Yes.
you know, that's a double standard. I'm not suggesting that you are more important than the next person, but you are as important.
Yeah,
So make sure that you, yes, so make sure you treat yourself as important as those around you. Seek support. You see, many of the users and abusers of the world will tend to gaslight you, if you know what I mean by gaslighting. They will tend to say to you, oh, you know, you don't need to seek support from other people. We're all that we need. You know, it's disloyal for you to seek support from your girlfriends, you know, or your, you know, whoever, or your family.
Yes.
That's disloyal to me. Well, no, it isn't. You know, in most good, healthy marriages, women talk about their husbands to their friends all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just seeking support, you know. It's just how it is. So don't allow yourself to be removed from your sources of support. Wherever possible, find people who are kind, wise, gentle, and who don't force their advice on you. Find them and try to share your problems with them. It makes you much stronger. So as I've talked about, looking for opportunity in life, not fairness. You know, life never was fair, and it wasn't designed that way, but there are opportunities in life. So, you know, sometimes life will throw you smelly stuff which you really haven't earned. Well, that's the way life is. Sometimes life will throw you a bouquet which you haven't earned. Well, you know, catch it and accept it. So look for opportunity, not fairness in life. And finally, if you're feeling guilty, you're probably getting something right. Now, this only applies to those people who are vulnerable to toxic people. This is only applies to people who tend to anxiety, low self-esteem, putting themselves last, maybe depression. So I'm not suggesting to everybody that they should go around doing things which make them feel guilty, because otherwise I'd be recommending chaos and anarchy. But to these vulnerable folks, then I'm saying, yes, do stuff. If you're feeling guilty, it means that for once in your life, you're starting to look after yourself, and you're setting some boundaries and saying no to people who need boundaries set with them. And that's going to make you feel guilty. Of course it is. Don't worry about that. That's a good sign. That guilt is short term, and it will pass because you become the way that you act.
That's a nice perspective about guilt. So thank you for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's much more, but I don't think I should go on too much today.
Yes, I think we should let our readers find more about other stuff and other important chapters in your book, like the toxic places, how we deal the toxic places. Yes, but I will just leave them, get the book, read about it, find more things about toxic people, toxic places, who we are, how we have to handle and deal with this situation. So my last question for you, and one of my main question, and I had this question even before getting to the last chapter. So the question is, what if I am a toxic person? What can I do?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the first thing is that if you think that you're a toxic person, you probably are not, because, you know, most toxic people don't care whether they're toxic or not. All they care about is, you know, the next advantage which they can gain. So the last thing they do is worrying about whether they're toxic. But, you know, let's assume that you're one of the rare examples. Well, in which case, the first thing is, it's not your fault. You know, people are the way they are for a very good reason, which is usually about their childhood. You know, childhood is the most potent way of a person being changed into a certain way. So it's not somebody's fault that they've had a childhood which has taught them to be toxic. It's just what they've learned. So yes, first of all, it's not your fault. Stop feeling so guilty about it. But second, don't assume that you can't change. You can change. You can change your personality. After all, what is personality? If you're saying that someone has an outgoing personality, you mean that they go out a lot. You are describing a behavior. There is a lot of psychological research showing that if you change your behavior, you then later change how you feel inside. So first of all, change what you do. Identify those behaviors which you really would want to stop or minimize, and concentrate on stopping them. Later on, you'll start feeling different because you become the way that you act. So do that. And thirdly and lastly, ask people who you trust and who you know are not going to try to humiliate you, but will be honest with you, and ask them what you need to change. And then try not to argue with them, because they'll say, "Oh, I think you're a bit selfish," and you'll go, "Oh, no, I'm not." Well, no, just listen to what they're saying, and then you can work out what's true and not later on. So that's some of the keys.
Mr. Cantopher, thank you so very much. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm looking forward to reading more of your articles and book, and maybe meeting you in person someday in the future. I hope the readers will find all of those interesting things in your book, as I did, and your interview with you made them more clear to me. And I'm pretty sure those who will see the interview and then read the book will totally have a very, very good perspective about what does it mean to be harmed by a toxic person, and what can you do to go out of those relationships. So, as I said, thank you so very much, and I hope you will have a good afternoon.
Well, thank you, and it's been a pleasure.